In American society, money is a taboo topic. We're taught at a young age it's improper to talk about it, but we're also bombarded with messages about the power and importance of money in our everyday lives. And by not talking about it, we miss out on the skills and lessons we need to effectively understand and financially plan. That changes today. Welcome to Money Tales. Hosted by Sandy Brager and Cami Doder, Money Tales brings more than 35 years of combined professional experience in personal finance to demystify money and demonstrate what it's like to speak openly about personal financial matters. Join us each episode as they interview modern-day movers and shakers about how money decisions intertwine with their daily lives in order to give you better insight into productive financial conversations. Subscribe today and register for our blog Fathom at aspiriant.com/podcasts to increase your money mojo. And now, here's Cami and Sandy.
This episode is all about the unwavering search for purpose and fulfillment. Hugh Massie is our guest this week on Money Tales. From accountant to behavioral specialist, Hugh realized that what truly drives financial decisions isn't just the numbers. It's the human behavior behind the numbers. From observing patterns in how people act under pressure to bringing in a behavioral psychologist to decode money habits, Hugh's story is about blending expertise with empathy. He even uprooted his life to build a groundbreaking system in the US, all to help people understand their own financial DNA. Let me tell you more about Hugh. He's executive chairman and founder of DNA Behavior International, the behavior and money insights company. Recognized as a Titan 100 CEO and a behavioral solutions architect, Hugh brings his quote-unquote behavior makes money perspective to every opportunity and challenge. Hugh is also an author, podcaster, and developer of financial behavior apps.
Here are 3 key money topics Hugh hits on in this conversation. First, how individuals have hardwired behavior that they revert to when they're under pressure. This behavior drives the resulting money decisions they make. Second, the power of delayed gratification and having all of what you need and some of what you want. And third, how money is what you think it is. Now it's our pleasure to bring you Hugh Massie's Money Tales.
Welcome to the Money Tales podcast. I'm Cami Doder.
And I'm Sandy Brager. Cami, I had the coolest experience last week. I got to take a hard hat tour of my synagogue, which is under a multi-million-dollar construction. It was really special for me because many years ago, when I was on the board of the congregation, this project was in its infancy. The building is a historic building. There's some seismic issues with it. Being located in San Francisco, we needed to address those. We conceived of this very large capital campaign, something that had never been done in the congregation's history, to raise money as a community to move forward with this important project that included building a lot of new square footage to make the building fit the current needs and the future needs for the congregation.
That requires money.
A lot of money and a lot of important money conversations because we wanted congregants of all shapes and sizes to contribute. We wanted to come at this as a full community. We didn't want to rely on just a handful of individuals or families to provide the financial capital. In addition, there was a lot of other capital we needed. We needed folks to be involved in these conversations. We needed folks to thank congregants who were pledging to make gifts to the capital campaign. And as the project is heading toward its conclusion, there's a lot of work that's going on to meet the needs of the building itself, the inner workings of it, artwork, how it's going to flow, how people will interact. It's the biggest project I've ever been involved with, and it was so fun to walk around this building and see what had been just a dream at one point start to become a reality.
Oh, Sandy, that's beautiful. I liked that it took this big community. I'm curious, did anybody share challenges that they were having or opportunities to overcome fear of having a money conversation if they were asking donors?
There was a lot that was done at the beginning to get the folks who would be primarily involved in those cultivation conversations ready to have the conversations and to feel comfortable. because no one involved in the project had ever asked for such large sums of money from donors before.
What a nice training ground.
And so there was some fear and trepidation, and we worked through it together. It was beautiful. And just like any other money conversation, once people got into the rhythm of having them, they got easier and easier.
And realize it's just a live conversation. And then you got to see the product and get to enjoy it and experience it. That's really beautiful.
I'm really excited. It's really cool to have been part of something that is so big and will be so impactful when it's done.
That's wonderful, Sandy. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome our guest today, Hugh Massie. It's wonderful to be talking with you on Money Tales.
It's great to be with you, Cami and Sandy.
Would you start us off by providing a brief introduction to who you are and share a couple pivotal moments that really impacted and influenced the person you are today?
Well, I suppose the person I am today is a reflection of my whole life and every decision that I've made and the environment that I grew up in. So for the listeners, you can pick up while I live in Atlanta, Georgia, in the US, I'm actually Australian. I came from Sydney to America, and I suppose that choice was a money moment in some ways. I think just to go backwards a little bit, I was brought up by my mother. I've got a younger brother. My father died when I was 1, and my mother was still pregnant with my brother. So she largely brought us up. My mother was from England, so her parents weren't there in Sydney, but my paternal grandmother was there. So she was part of my life as well, not in terms of living in the house, but both my mother and grandmother were very strong influences. I went to an all-boys boarding school when I was 9 years old. That took me out of the house. I got my first bank account when I was 5, but when I went to the all-boys boarding school for the next 8 years, I got $20 a term. So we had 3 terms a year, 12 weeks or 13 weeks each. And for each term, remember on the border, I got $20 a term was my pocket money, was put in my bank account, and that was it. And you got to remember at that time, other kids at the school were getting 1,000 a term. It was all over the place in that respect. Then I left school. I became what we call in Australia a chartered accountant or a CPA. And I did that for 10 years. And then I decided that I wanted to go on an entrepreneurial journey. So I left the world of Arthur Andersen. This is quite a way before it ceased to exist, and set up a wealth management family office business in Sydney. And I did that for the next few years. I was busy at that, but I think like probably you guys do at Experian, I started to see a whole lot of patterns of behavior in the way in which people would act out a certain way in a socialized setting, but they'd be different under pressure. So I wanted to know that. And as I reflected, I saw that when I was giving tax advice as well in my early part of my career. Everyone wants to avoid taxes and minimize it, but can they take the risks? And I think in between that, I also figured out, which is important to all of this, that I wanted to help people have a hyper-personalized experience in the service they got. And when I was at Arthur Andersen, I somehow intuitively learned early on that while one person might ask me the question and want a letter written, they weren't necessarily the decision maker or the bill payer. I learned to figure out all the people involved, and I customized what I delivered based on that, of course, with the right answer. That set me on that train. And what I started to learn in the wealth management business was that money puts people under pressure. There's a lot of stress involved, and a lot of behaviors come out that you don't necessarily see. And what I began to realize, and I was taught by a behavioral psychologist I brought into the wealth management business, which is an unusual thing back in 2001 to do, was that people have this hardwired behavior. And that's what they're reverting back to under pressure, and affects the way they deal with money. It affects their relationships. And in fact, relationships put people under a lot of pressure. I think, as you guys know, you can have a couple sitting in front of you or a family. Doesn't really matter who it is. They're different, and they've got different perspectives on money. My brother does to me, even though we came from the same parents. All those things played on me, and that's what then led me to want to build the DNA behavior business. So I had the psychologist help me work on a system, and then she sent me to America, and I met these people in Atlanta, and I came across 40 times in 4 years or thereabouts, building a system. And then I had to make a choice of where was I going to live. And I think, though, that probably what you guys are going to ask me, but why would I uproot myself? I had started to build a successful wealth management business in Sydney with quite a spread of clients. I sometimes look back and think, well, what if I had that today? But I was never happy helping people. I was not fulfilled with it. I never really wanted to be someone's investment manager. I don't mind doing it for me. And I think when I unrooted it all, I was much more about what was my purpose. And I wanted to help people become financially self-empowered. That didn't necessarily mean to me managing their money. That was more about helping them understand themselves and what their relationship to money is, which is, of course, you're putting me in the hot seat today.
You know where our questions are going, Hugh.
I sort of know where they're going, but I don't know till I've got the questions. That gives you some of my journey. And therefore, I had a choice. I could have stayed there in Australia running a wealth management family office type business. And who knows where that would be today. I was always interested in real estate. I would have done a lot of work in that area with the clients. I knew I had to be focused at some point. Let's go and build my own brand with the DNA behavior, which wasn't quite called that at the time. We called it financial DNA because we were using it in the wealth management business. But today it's DNA behavior with varying products. But it was more about being fulfilled. And I think making a quantum leap in my own life and testing myself. And so that's what led me in the end to say, okay, I'll stay in America. I always enjoyed being in America, certainly at that time. And let's go for it.
We're going to get into this. But before we do, I can't get past, you're at your boarding school. You're getting $20 a term. Sounds like everything's paid for, but you've got to do any of the extracurricular off of 20. And there's some kids who are getting up to $1,000. Would you share not only how that make you feel, but also what did that imprint on you that you've taken forward to today?
Just to clarify for the audience, at the boarding school, everything's included. Whatever extracurricular thing I wanted to do was included. Whatever activity. So it wasn't any pay to play there. Once the school fees were paid, you're in for whatever you want to do, as much as you want to do. The pocket money was really about going to the tuck shop, to be honest. And then as school went along, some of the kids would use theirs to buy riding boots and hats and equipment for sports and things like that. Whereas for me, that was restricted to, okay, if I wanted a new cricket bat, because I played cricket, that comes at your next birthday, that type of thing.
What'd you take away from this?
We had a lot of discussions with my mother about it. And I think one of the life messages in there is you've got to save a bit today to have something for tomorrow. That was a big part of it. I think it also brought out was if I was going to spend money, was it important? And did I really need all the things that maybe the other kids had? No. In the end of the day, I didn't want for anything. So it didn't make me feel bad, but I think it did shine a light that there are others who have got more, some of them spoiled. They didn't necessarily do better at school because of it, or we're better humans. What it did do was help me sort out what's important. You don't need every luxury. That was okay for me. So long as I got at my birthday and Christmas, the things that I did need for school sports or those types of activities.
So you weren't wanting for anything. There's just maybe some delayed gratification.
Delayed gratification. I can't say that I really wanted for anything because I think that my mother made sure that in the end of the day, me and my brother were well provided for. I think that the fact that we went to the school we did was a privilege. It's a testament to her. My grandmother would occasionally step in and spoil us a little bit, but that's what grandmothers do. But it wasn't anything certainly over the top or outshining my mother in any way.
You mentioned that you opened up your first bank account at age 5 and that your mom was talking to you about money when you went off to boarding school. Were there other conversations as you were growing up around money? Were they open?
There were a lot of conversations in the family. One, because ever since I could talk, I was interested in business. At 5 years old, I would sit there playing Lego and I was building buildings and castles and visioning out the life that I was going to create. And I had all my teddy bears lined up around the Lego that was laid out across the floor of our playroom. And that's what fascinated me. And I think everybody around thought, well, Hugh just wants to build an empire and it's all about having the most money. I think as I have gone through life, I can see through that wasn't so much the case. It was more about, a life dream of fulfilling a potential with a business that had a big reach rather than, is this business worth $1 million, $100 million, $1 billion, or at $1? It was more about doing it. But that was probably the conversations I had with myself. But I always like to talk about money. My mother had started a business, so she had her own business. The family also had what you would call in America a cattle ranch. We didn't live on it, but we went to it a lot. There were business enterprises in the family that were a talking point. And because my father and grandfather had died, these things had to be managed by my mother and grandmother. And to be honest, they were often at war with each other about it because there's a fight for control. And there are a whole lot of issues that happened that were beyond their control because of the way in which and the timing of my father and paternal grandfather dying that left everybody in a spot they never thought they'd be in, would be the simplest way. And it's just the way it is. So I was reflecting on that today, what I would say about that, because I don't want it to sound like, okay, we didn't have any money. It was a matter of whose hands it was in. The taxman in those days in Australia got a lot more than was ever planned. But because of the order of people dying with my father first, and the planning was built around him at my grandparents' level, it caused issues. And I think my mother and grandmother never got past it. It was a big thing for them, bigger than for me and my brother, because my brother and I were brought up and went to school. What we missed out on was not having a dad emotionally at that level, but we didn't want for anything. And I would say most people would look at us and say, we're pretty privileged. Not the most, but pretty.
It's super cool that you had these strong female members of your family in charge in modeling for you all of this decision making and the conversations that you were learning and having.
My mother was brought up in the Depression era in England and the Second World War, more to the point as well, that there were a lot of things they didn't have. She went to all-girls boarding school like my grandmother did. So this sort of boarding school was a thing which is more of it probably dominant in England and Australia than it is maybe here in America, unless you come from the Northeast. But I think that they were taught some pretty hard lessons about saving, being resource smart. You had to be careful because you don't know when things are going to be ripped away from you. And today's generations don't know about that. And that's something that we may be going to experience yet.
Hugh, you said something from your experience in the wealth management space. You said money puts people under pressure and that there's a lot of stress involved. Describe why you think that is.
One of my topics that I talk about with people is the energy of money. And I think that you can look at money as a currency. In a way, money itself is neutral. But money is also behavioral. It's what you think it is. And the fact is that thoughts about money are with you 24/7, whether they are in your sleep, in your daytime consciousness. Most of us are thinking about money in some format, even if we're not really aware of it, all day long. And to a large degree, that's what we are in our mindsets are imputing on it. But also money puts people under pressure because some will get worried if I lose some. Probably you've seen it. I've had a client with $50 million and they're worried that they haven't got enough. And that was a mindset issue. I could see where that came from. There's other people that it's more concerned about what are their children doing or their grandchildren going to do. And it causes them enormous stress because somehow money, it is a vehicle of life. It's a fuel, but how we treat it and what we think it is in some ways is mindset. And I think that's where some people get tangled up. And of course, there's clearly a whole lot of people out there that don't have enough. And that's a stress in itself of how am I going to pay the bills tomorrow? I think money can be just as stressful whether you have it or don't have it. And it's about your mindset with it.
I'm curious, Hugh, as an adult, when did you first feel money pressure in your life, whether it was good or bad?
I'll go back to the first time when I thought that, but there's obviously lots of times. But I think that when I was leaving Arthur Andersen at 30 years old, I'd worked 10 years there and I made the decision I was going to leave. I could have stayed and been a partner. At least that's what they were telling me. So you never know until you are. But I was told that if you stay 6 more months, this is your pathway. But I decided to leave. And I think they were fairly shocked. And at that point, I had to make a decision between, okay, I was getting a good regular salary. I was going to become a partner. My next 10 years, I could see that the income would go up, but I wasn't happy. And I wasn't happy with some of the things that I was seeing going on in the firm. And I didn't like the way that some of the other people I could see were not happy themselves. I thought, I don't need to buy into this. I'm 30 years old. I'm not yet married. Let's go and have a crack at something myself. when I left, I didn't have an income from working or anything like that. So I had to rely on my own resources and go and figure out what I wanted to do.
So you figured that out after you left the firm.
They even said to me, when you're leaving, Hugh, you think you know how all this is going to work, but you're a long way off. And I said, yeah, I probably am, but now's the time to go and for me to get it right out there on the street. And they said, if you want to come back anytime in the next 2 years, you can. And here's what the terms of that will be, which is nice and was a credit, I think, to me. But I didn't want any part of that. It's not that I didn't love the people or anything. It was just time for me to move on and unshackle myself and try something else out where I could expand my future. But I didn't know completely, Sandy, at that time, what I was passionate about, what the purpose was. That came probably really well after I set up the wealth management business.
Was purpose even on your radar screen as an adult at that time?
No, this happened in 1996. It wasn't until late 1999, a friend of mine said, you've done pretty well with your wealth management business, but are you really happy? And I said, no, I'm not fulfilled with this. Well, what are you passionate about? Immediately out of my subconscious came, I want to help people all over the world become financially self-empowered. Never thought about it like that. I was on a bit of a spiritual journey to explore myself, but never anything like that. And I thought, okay, if I've said that, I need to do something about it. And that's really when then, probably 6 months later, the DNA solutions that I do today started to find their way into the wealth management business. And I started to change in terms of how I approach things, what I thought about, what the issues were. My priorities changed. Sometimes it just takes one question.
That's a good question. As you were thinking about your purpose, were you thinking about money along with it? Like, how am I going to make money?
No, I thought more about what did it mean and how would I operationalize it? But I didn't think about how much is that going to make me? I thought more about, is there something that can be done here that's unique? I then pieced together that in our wealth management business in Sydney, I'd be a wealth mentor and I was going to focus on human behavioral issues. And that's when I then had a chance meeting with the behavioral psychologist. She said, well, the issues are A, B, C, D. I can help you build a system. And I hired her straight away. The costs were not a factor. I was going to have that system and this methodology because I already knew it would be unique. And we worry about what the returns on that are later. That is as simple as how it was approached because I knew it was right. And I think that's the thing is that intuitively, I knew this was right. This was a fit for me. It allowed me to still have business accounting, if you want to call it, financial conversations with people at a business level or a investment level, but I could explore the human being in the process. That was the piece that was missing for me. And this gave me more tangible process to do it.
So Hugh, you were all in. You relocate Australia to Atlanta.
Which you'd never dream of doing.
It's an interesting move. You're now in a whole new society with a very different money perspective, a very different money culture.
Very different money culture in America to Australia. I now understand it, but it's taken me even this long to figure it out.
Well, tell us what it was like because you're experiencing that all as you become an entrepreneur in a space that you hadn't operated in before. It was tangential to what you had been doing when you started your wealth management business, but it was very different.
If you look back on it and look at how hard it has been and was, I might not have done it. But I think that would be what a lot of entrepreneurs would say about building a business. There's always been, Sandy, an undying belief in what I was doing was right. And I think I was aware enough that with any business venture, you start with business plan A and you get to business plan G before anything works. And then you go all the way from business plan H to Z and along that journey and you keep redefining things. But to do that, you've got to have an undying belief in the end game of it and why you're doing that for yourself, even if that's coming at a huge cost. And that's what's important. And as you said, all in, I've had to be all in at all levels, not just financially, but I think also emotionally, mentally, professionally, because as you said, this was one way for me going from an accountant to a behavioral specialist.
It's a big change.
I started my career in public accounting. That's a huge change.
Yeah, when you look at the fact that until the last few years, there's been a lot of glazed eyes around what is behavioral economics, behavioral finance. There's a lot of research done on it now, but there's not a lot of solutions. beyond a risk profile tool. Me sticking that out, that shows you what I think about it in terms of the depth. Society has changed a lot more now towards more people wanting meaning. Even though they're not there yet, it's still a lot of people would be, well, what money am I going to make, etc. And that coming first over their values. We're still more towards a society that does want meaning. At least more people in the society want meaning. I'm not saying all do. We've still got some steps to go. And I think that's helpful.
Do you think we were too focused on the what and not the why? Is that what becoming financially self-empowered is all about?
Yeah, I think being financially self-empowered, you could look at that as financial literacy, is not teaching people what a stock or a bond is or an exchange traded fund or whatever. Even though those things are important, the hard bit's helping people understand themselves and building the right relationship with themselves, because I don't believe you can build the right relationship with money till you build the right relationship with yourself.
I would agree with that. Hugh, this is fascinating. Tell us, what's your next money conversation going to be and who's it going to be with?
It is with my children. It's partially already in play. My two children are 13 and 12. My daughter is the older, and she's a pretty good little saver and very conscious of where it all is, but she'll spend some money when it's important to her. My son is probably the one that might be a little bit more of a spendthrift. He wants everything and is interested what other people have. And we've had the conversation because he keeps asking, well, Dad, how much are you worth? And what have you got? And what does the business make? And I said, it doesn't really matter what I'm worth, because he's called Hugh too. What's important for you to understand is you're going to have all of what you need and some of what you want, which I think in the end of the day also came from my mother, even though it sounded a little bit tight with the $20 a month pocket money. That is the end result. I said, you'll be still going to the same school that you go to. He goes to a private school. It's a good school in Atlanta. You're going to get a good education. You'll be able to go to college, all the things that are important. We talk about the fact that he's got to do jobs or comes and he helps me in the garden and we do some stuff together. For some of the jobs, I could just pay someone. But to have him trolling around with me and my daughter as well, it's about spending quality time together. There's some chit chat. It's getting them to do things like he's learned to pave a driveway, that type of thing. I never had that from a father. It's important that they get some experiences. And in a way, I'm learning on the job. I suppose all parents are, but it's them understanding there's some nice holidays, but they've also staying focused at school. We're not just pulling out the checkbook for stuff just because we can. It's balanced. But we've explained it that we believe in investing in holidays and life experiences, not necessarily driving around in the most expensive car. You know, there's plenty of people that drive around in expensive cars because it makes them look good and eating in restaurants, but then where do they go on their vacation? Nowhere.
They can't afford it.
Yeah. What are the priorities? So I think that's sort of an area of continuing evolution as far as money conversations. And my wife is also part of it because we've got to be on the same page in that prioritization. Education is important, but so are life experiences.
Hugh, these are such important conversations. I love this. You're going to have all of what you need and some of what you want. That's a very powerful message. And thanks for sharing that and all your stories with us. Where's the best place for listeners to find you?
I can be found on LinkedIn. So just Hugh Massie in LinkedIn. I'm the only one, certainly in Atlanta. There's very few of us in the world other than my son. So you can find me there. And there's lots of things I write about these topics. So it's pretty traceable. And then our website at dnabehavior.com.
Beautiful. Well, thank you again for joining us on Money Tales.
It's been fantastic. It's been great fun.
Thanks for listening to the Money Tales podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with someone you think would benefit from listening. And leave us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. Your ratings and reviews help more people find our podcast. If you're inspired to gain clarity and peace of mind about financial matters, don't hesitate to reach out to our team at Asperient. Go to asperient.com/start a dialogue. Or you can email Sandy and me at podcasts@asperient.com. See you next time.